2 Corinthians 9, 6 and 7. Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Eddie, for letting me steal your slot this week. We're going to be talking about blessings some more this week. We kind of did an overview last week, but there's some stuff I kind of want to drill a little deeper in here. I won't necessarily call this week's message a part 2, because a lot of it is going to be ideas that we touched on last time, but we are going to try to go kind of just that next level deeper. Some things I wasn't able to get to last time. So if some of this sounds familiar, you still might be going crazy, but it's not because of that. So, nothing to do with me. So regarding blessings, kind of just to review, last time we did talk about where our blessings come from. It's a good place to start on the subject. And if you look in James chapter 1, verse 17, it tells us, it says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." So where do our blessings come from? They ultimately come from God. And we talked a bit about how that can apply to the coincidences that we have throughout our day-to-day lives, where some random, unexpected something you'd have never thought it could have happened happens, and it's a good thing and you're blessed through that. That obviously comes from God. We call it an act of God. We call other things acts of God's too, but that's a good one. But it can also apply to the fruits of our labor. We talk about how you can sow your field, you can tend your crops, you can work your job, you can put all the effort you want towards a particular goal, but at the end of the day, the results at some point in that process have to either happen or not. A doctor can have all the knowledge that he has, he can work his medicine as best as he can, but at the end of the day, a patient either responds or doesn't to the treatment. And when that happens, we give glory to God, because he's the one that ultimately gives that. So ultimately, all of our things come from God. And this is at the core of this idea that we have within Christianity of stewardship, that the things we have in this life are not really ours. They ultimately belong to God, and there's responsibilities that come with that. You'll turn to Matthew chapter 25. I looked at this last week, but we'll just reread it for the sake of familiarity. Beginning in verse 14, Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the talents. "For the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went home and traded with them and made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, 'Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I've made 5 talents more.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little, so I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master.' And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, 'Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more.' And his master said, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master.' He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you do not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers at my coming. And at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away, and cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So to kind of unpack what's going on here, first of all, did the master give the talents to his servants? Did he go up to them and say, Here, have some money, buy a gumball? No. The talents they did not belong to the servants. It says he entrusted to them his property. The talents were still the master's property, even though the servants had control over them, even though they were probably benefiting from them during the time of his absence. They still ultimately belonged to him. So when our master gives us his property, whose property is it still? It's still God's. So when we use it, should we be using it as if it belongs to us, or should we use it as if we have been entrusted with God's property? It's God's property. And so then what does the master do to these various servants? Well, some of them, the 2 with the 5 talents, the one who received a lot, the one with 2 talents, who didn't necessarily receive a whole lot, they both went and they put their talents to work. They invested them in trade. Among other things, it's vague. But they made use of it. And as a result, what happened? Those talents multiplied. They were able to come to their master with more than they had initially received. And they were praised for that. And they said, Good, you have been faithful with a little, I will put you in charge of more. So what would happen to that person? If we have a blessing, we put those blessings to use, those blessings will multiply, and then our Father in heaven, if we've been faithful with the little that he's given us, whatever that may or may not be, he'll put us in charge of more, whatever that looks like. And maybe it's more of the same, maybe it's more of something else, and he wants us to try something else. But that's the general principle there. But then you have that 3rd servant, who he didn't receive a whole lot in the first place, but what did he do with it? He buried it. He pretended like he had nothing at all, because he didn't want to have to deal with the consequences if something went wrong. And as a result, nothing happened to those talents. Nothing happened with his master's property. It did not expand and multiply. It did not reap a reward from good investment and activity. And so it was taken away from him and given to someone who would actually make use of it. And then the servant was punished accordingly. Similarly, when we have blessings come to us, if we just pretend they don't exist or we just sit on it, what does this imply will be the case with us? We'll end up losing the blessings that we have, and they'll be given to someone who will make use of those blessings. But what does that mean, and what does that look like? What exactly are we being given these blessings for? Well, if you turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and Ron read part of this, but we're going to hit the second half of this passage now. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 10. 1 second. It says, He who supplies seed, God, to the sower, and bread for food, will supply and multiply your seed for sowing, and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us produces thanksgiving to God. So God, we already talked about how every good gift, every good thing that we receive in this life comes from God. He enriches us in every way. For what purpose? To be generous in every way. And it says it very explicitly here. And that's stewardship in a nutshell. There it is, all in black and white. There was something I had in my head there, but whatever. Point is, we are given the gifts that we have in this life so that we can share them with others, so that we can be the salt of the earth. I remember now. God gives us what we need to sustain us. He gives us what we need because he wants us to be happy, but in our excess, in what we have left over, we should be willing to share that with others, to be a blessing to others as we have been blessed. And that is ultimately the purpose of those blessings in the first place. We have been given blessings in order to bless others so that we may reap a harvest of thanksgiving to God. Mm-hmm. It's the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. It's the idea of being the salt of the earth. So that's where our blessings come from. That's why we've been given our blessings. But of course, sometimes we fail to use our blessings the way that they should be used. And this is where I really want to get into practical stuff, because this is important. We've seen in this parable that we will be held accountable to how we have used or misused the blessings that we have. And I think one of the first things we can do to take responsibility of that is to ponder on what does prevent us from doing this. What are the things that, the thought patterns and the behavioral patterns that we can look at to recognize, wait a minute, I may be off track here, so that we can correct what we're doing. So some of this we tapped on last time, but I want to go through a few of the common ways that this tends to come up, so that, again, we can develop that kind of spiritual self-awareness. Well, the first way that we fail to share our blessings is sometimes we don't think that we have any blessings to share. We get this idea in our head that, I don't have a lot of money or time or whatever, and so I don't have anything to share with others. I would say that especially if you're here listening to me right now, you have something. God has blessed you in some way. Blessings are not just money; they're not just physical possessions. And if you are lacking in one area, maybe take some time to stop, to breathe, to meditate, and see where God may have given you much. I think this is an important practice of thankfulness to help us avoid becoming bitter, to becoming so fixated on the things that inevitably do go wrong in our lives, or where we have been presented with a lack, or maybe we lost something we didn't feel like we should have. It takes our attention and it pulls it away from that, and it pulls it towards the good things that God is doing for us. It softens our heart, and it pulls our attention towards others. And, how can I minister to you? And then once you've done this, use what you have, even if it seems like an insignificant something, and it will begin to multiply. I think last time I used the example of, if you have a voice, say something nice to someone. Tell them, hey, it's good to see you. Compliment them. Give them a kind word. You would be amazed at, that person could be having the worst day of their life, and that word you gave to them could have been game-changing. You don't know. And that's the thing, is also, our job is not necessarily to, think, our job is to give, and then God handles the increase from that. He handles the results. And he can use it in ways that we would have never been able to predict. And if we are in this position where we don't think that we have any blessings, this can be for two reasons. The first is maybe we're just not taking the time to stop and think and to be properly thankful. We can also, and this is maybe a little uncomfortable, when you have had blessings, how did you use those blessings? Did you use them to bless others, or did you sit on them? Did you do what the servant with the one talent did? In which case, maybe that's why you don't have it now. I don't know. either way, the key is to find what you do have and to start putting it to work the way that we're supposed to. Second way that we can fail to be generous with our blessings is that sometimes we're afraid. We're afraid that if we are generous, if we give our blessing away, that then we won't have a blessing and it will be gone. And oh no, then what will I do? And don't get me wrong, we need to be wise and we need to be prudent and we need to be shrewd about how we use those blessings. It is our master's property. We are not to just give away our master's property. We are to manage our master's property. So, and again, last time I think I said, like, if we're blessed with 5 of something a week and we consistently give 7 of it away each week, that's mismanagement. You're not even going to be able to do a whole lot of good with that because after a week or 2, you're not going to have anything. So, don't get me wrong, we should be thoughtful about how and when we are generous. However, it should always be towards an ultimate goal of sustainable generosity. It should not just be to build bigger barns and ever unassailable strongholds against, oh, well, but what if something happens? If something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if God has decided that, and whether it's to punish you or just to move things around, sometimes it's not even about us having done something wrong. See the book of Job. You know, if that's what's going to happen, no amount of you hoarding things in a hole somewhere is going to stop that. So you might as well have used some of that in the meantime to invest in spiritual things. Because I find God's a lot less likely to pull that type of thing away from me than the physical game pieces, so to speak. In Proverbs, let's turn to Proverbs chapter 11, because there's other reasons here that we should be eager to give without needing to fear about going without. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 23. It says, the desire of the righteous ends only in the good, the expectation of the wicked in wrath. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. The people curse him who hold back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. So if our concern here is that I'm going to be too generous, and then I'm going to not have anything, again, with common sense in play, that's the opposite of what it's saying here. It's saying that he who waters is himself watered. He who gives freely grows all the richer. Those who bless others will receive further blessing, and maybe not in the same form that we give it away. A lot of times it's not. But we will be blessed back. We will not be without blessing. However, those who withhold what they should give, those who could be generous but choose not to because, oh, but what if a thing happens over here? What does it say? It says they'll be impoverished. In the parable of the talents, what he has is taken away and given to someone who's using the property of his master as it's intended. The last way, or at least the last one that we'll cover today, because we could go on a very long, depressing exploration of all the infinite ways we can fail ourselves. But sometimes, you know, we fail to use our blessings appropriately because we make our generosity or our lack of generosity not about trying to do good, but we make it about ourselves. And we make it about our hurts and our bitterness and our insecurities and such, and that becomes a focal point of how we think about the things that God has given us, and that's a problem, because that's not, you know, if you're just distracted and not realizing the blessings that you have, if you're afraid that you're going to mismanage it or that it's going to go away, those are things that we need to overcome. But there is a certain innocence to that. Like, you're not trying to, like, hurt someone in doing that. Sometimes we can actually engage in a bit of stingy behavior or in giving for the wrong reasons. We'll get into it here. And it is actually kind of, there's a certain malice. There's a certain sinful attitude underlying it. We're actually just kind of being a brat. And we need to adjust ourselves accordingly. And, you know, it's kind of a hydra in the sense that there's a lot of heads, but it's all kind of the same monster at the base of it. But let's look at some of the ways this can manifest in our lives, this attitude of making our gifts about us. First, we can make our blessing about ourselves by, of course, giving with the wrong motives. We're being very generous, but why are we being generous? Oh, look at me, I have all this stuff, and oh, I'm gonna buy everyone here a new house, and look at me. And it's very showy, very, you know, the attention's on you, and oh, look what I can do. And of course, there's famous comments from Jesus about this. If you look in Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 2, he says, "Thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees it in secret will reward you. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward." The blessing that is given in this way will not multiply. The way of blessing given with the right spirit multiplies, because as Jesus says, and he's the one that would be multiplying it, they have already received their reward. They got attention, that's why they did it, so okay, here you go. There will be. That's not the point of this exercise, and again, it's focusing what you're supposed to be doing for God onto yourself. But of course, we can also do it the opposite way. There are ways that we make our make our blessings about us by withholding them. Sort of an idea. Well, we'll get into it. And so, what can happen is there's an opportunity to be kind or to be generous to someone, and it's perfectly within our power. We could absolutely do it. It doesn't hurt us per se to do this, but we don't. And we decide to throw ourselves a pity party instead. And we go into, oh, well, you know, something happened to me once upon a time, and oh, you know, no one ever did that for me, so why should I help this person now? Well, because you can. Sorry. That's kind of what it boils down to, is because you can, and because that's why you have the ability to do it, is so that you can. And to not overanalyze and micromanage whether this is should I be doing this here or not. No, you can do it. You can do it responsibly. You should do it. And as far as but what about, and reality check. Every single person in this room has at one point had something bad happen to them. Everyone has had some unfairness inflicted upon them. And that's terrible, but it's not out of the ordinary. We could all spin some kind of tragic backstory for ourselves if we really wanted to. Do we use that as an excuse to not do good in the present? No. Especially when half the time it has nothing to do with what's going on in the present. The fact that something unfair happened to you before does not mean that you then inflict unfairness upon other people. It doesn't make that go away. So stop it. Just stop it. Another thing that can come up is sometimes we get envious. We say, oh, well, that person, well, they have that thing over there. I don't have that thing. No one gave that to me. Why should I give them the thing that I have then? They don't need it. They have all of this. And this one, there's a few things we can unpack. First of all, you have no idea what that person needs. It's like we were kind of talking about before. Never mistake someone's onstage presence for their backstage reality. I mean, we all get up and we put on some kind of a face. You don't know what they're hurting with or where they're lacking, and maybe God gave you the thing that you have and put you where you were in that moment so that you could do your maybe seemingly inconsequential thing and completely turn their day around. You don't know, because it's not your job to know, but it's your job to do the work. And if we're jealous and we're envious of this other stuff this person has that we don't, look, depriving other people is not going to cause you to have more. Well, what did it say? It said, one who withholds what he should give only suffers want. Here's another thing to think about. If they have something, and it's a good thing, that's a blessing, right? Where do our blessings come from? They come from God. So who gave that to them? Even if they're not a Christian, who gave it to them? God did. Why are you sitting there having a bad attitude about how God chose to use his property? Romans 12:15 tells us we're to rejoice with those who rejoice. Because that is God doing something good in this world, and why would we not rejoice about that? Especially when it benefits one of our fellow servants. If something good is happening to someone else, we should want to be a part of that, and if we can't be a part of that, or we just, for whatever reason, can't bring ourselves to be a part of it, we should at least back off and not be a hindrance. We also, and I don't know, I don't want to get off on too many rabbit trails. Like I said, we could just go on and on. We also don't give because we already covered that part. We don't give because others need the thing that we're giving anyway. We give because we're to have giving hearts. The temple did not need the widow's mite, but it was still credited to her as righteousness because, again, it's about the giving heart. There, that's a whole paragraph of my notes. We'll just da-da-da. A third way this comes up is sometimes we do it to puff ourselves up or to cover for our own kind of personal insecurities. And this one's a little weird, but I see this type of thing in management a lot, where like you'll have someone and every single time something comes up where someone who's either their employee or just otherwise under their jurisdiction, something good's going to happen for them, there's a raise coming or a bonus or just some good thing, they are right there in the gap, working overtime, making sure that doesn't happen. They're going to put a stop to that. And if they can't put a stop to it, well, then we're gonna make sure it's as little as we can possibly get away with not giving them. We're gonna make it so super complicated. We're gonna put all these caveats and what ifs, and ultimately take what should be a very straightforward, simple, kind thing, and make it so complicated and so hard and wrap it in so many strings that it makes a spider blush. And there's never a reason for it. And you ask them, well, why is it so? Because it's not about the employee, it's not about the amount, it's whatever context, whatever, big, small, whatever. It's just a general principle for the person. And you ask them why, and there's never really a reason. Like sometimes they'll deflect maybe into one of these other things you talk about. Well, I had some, I had hard times once. So what? No one's allowed to have a good thing happen? And a lot of times what's at the root of this type of thing is at some point, this person maybe had something bad happen to them, or maybe they have an insecurity in their life somewhere. And they've taken that and they've turned their focus on themselves, and they've allowed themselves to become embittered. They've internalized it, and in so doing, they have fooled themselves into thinking that by ensuring that others have less, that somehow they will have more, or will look better. And in this type of case, especially in like management, they've got that tiny little bit of power now, and so now they get to be the big shot. And oh, look at me, now I get to be the bully. Now I get to hurt other people. And I want to let that sit. Because when we take the things that God has given us, whether that's money, whether that's time, it could be authority. The authority is a blessing. It's not maybe your money or your resources directly, but you're in charge of it. When we take those things and we make it about us, and we deprive people of blessing that we are supposed to pass on to them because, oh, well, all of this about me, we are hurting people. And we cannot do that. Because God has some very choice words for that type of thing, especially when we are more than willing to receive the blessings that we deprive other people. Turn to, and of course it's on the next page, turn to Matthew chapter 18. This will be the last passage and then we'll wrap up because I think we're going a little long. Matthew chapter 18, we'll start in verse 23. It's another parable. And it's kind of weirdly similar in structure to the parable of the talents, but I don't know that I've really heard it discussed much in that context. But beginning in verse 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all he had, and the payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." And out of pity, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him, began to choke him, saying, "Pay what you owe." So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." But he refused, and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you?" And in his anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all of his debt. So what do we have in this case? We have a servant who received a blessing. It's a little less straightforward because this is technically discussing forgiveness, but forgiveness is also a blessing. The servant received a blessing from his master in the form of the forgiven debts. But then, when it came within his power to bless his fellow servant in the same way, what did he do? He refused, and he violently refused. And we can speculate all of, why, and what are the motives? It's a fictional story, probably, so there's not actually an answer, but we could play around with that. But he refused. He refused to pass on the blessing that was given to him. And so what happened? What did the master think of that? Well, it says that in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers, or in some translations it says delivers him to be tortured until he should pay all of his debt. We need to make sure that we are using the blessings that God gives us for their intended purpose, and especially if we are failing to do so, it should not be because we have decided that it is actually our possession. Because that is a very serious thing that God does not look kindly on that. We serve a God